The steward's hands were shaking as he stood in the back of the hall, watching the woman he loved being given away like chattel to a man whose cruelty was whispered about in every corner of the province. Lyra Norgath stood at the altar with her back straight and her chin lifted, though Nathaniel Morren could see the tension in her shoulders beneath the ceremonial robe they had forced her to wear. Her green skin looked pale in the dim light filtering through the narrow windows of Lord Vaster's great hall. Her small tusks barely showed as she kept her mouth pressed into a hard line. She was not tall for an orc woman, perhaps only an inch or two above Nathaniel's own 6 feet, but she carried herself with a dignity that made her seem carved from stone. Her build was heavier than a human woman's, feminine curves evident even beneath the shapeless robe, strong from years of working her clan's failing farm in the borderlands. The man she was about to marry stood beside her like a tower of malice. Gorath the Red was not his given name, but the title he had earned through bloodshed. He was human, a warlord who controlled 3 frontier settlements through fear and the mercenary company he commanded. His face was scarred, his eyes cold, and his smile when he looked at Lyra was the smile of a man who had just purchased a new possession. Nathaniel had spent the last month arranging this farce. As steward of the Vaster estate, it had been his duty to facilitate the agreement when Lyra's clan had come begging for relief from the blood debt they owed Gorath. The warlord had claimed that Lyra's brother had killed one of his men in a border skirmish. The price he demanded was either 5,000 silver marks or the sister in marriage. The Norgath clan had no money. They had nothing but a failing farm and their pride. So Lyra had agreed to save her family. Nathaniel had tried to find another way. For 4 weeks he had pored over ledgers, sent letters to neighboring lords, and even approached Gorath himself to negotiate a lesser sum. The warlord had refused every alternative with that same cold smile. He wanted Lyra specifically, and Nathaniel had come to understand that this was never about the debt. This was about power, about taking something beautiful and free and breaking it. The efficient, a nervous priest who served at Lord Vaster's chapel, cleared his throat and opened the marriage rites. His voice trembled as he spoke the traditional words. Everyone in the hall knew what this was. Even Lord Vaster, seated in his chair at the head of the room, looked uncomfortable. But the law was the law. A blood debt was sacred, and Gorath held the legal right to collect. "We are gathered here to witness the binding of Gorath, called the Red, and Lyra of Clan Norgath," the priest began. His hands clutched the Book of Rites so tightly his knuckles were white. "This union is entered to settle the debt of blood owed for the death of Marcus Thorn, guardsman, killed by the hand of Darren Norgath." Lyra's jaw tightened. Nathaniel knew she still maintained her brother's innocence. Darren had been a hunter, not a fighter. The idea that he had killed an armed mercenary was unlikely at best. But Gorath had produced witnesses, and the local magistrate had ruled in his favor. "If any here know of an impediment to this union," the priest continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "speak now, or I object." The words left Nathaniel's mouth before his mind could catch up to his heart. The hall fell silent. Every head turned toward him. He stepped forward from the shadows at the back of the room, his legs somehow still carrying him despite feeling like water. Gorath's face went from surprise to fury in an instant. "Who dares?" Nathaniel Morren, Nathaniel said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Steward of this estate." Lord Vaster rose from his chair, his aged face creased with confusion and concern. "Nathaniel, what is the meaning of this?" Lyra had turned to stare at him, her dark eyes wide with shock. In all their conversations over the past month, as Nathaniel had worked through the legal arrangements and Lyra had prepared herself for this fate, He had never once suggested he would do this. How could he have? What right did he have to complicate her sacrifice? But he could not watch it happen. Not without speaking. "The marriage cannot proceed," Nathaniel said, walking down the center aisle toward the altar, his heart hammered against his ribs. 20 armed men loyal to Gorath stood along the walls. Lord Vaster's own guards numbered perhaps a dozen. This could turn bloody very quickly. "Cannot proceed." Gorath stepped away from Lyra, his hand moving to the sword at his belt. "You have no authority to stop it, steward. The debt is legal. The agreement is binding." "An agreement made under false pretenses is not binding," Nathaniel said. He had reached the front of the hall now, standing 10 feet from Gorath. The warlord was broader than him, heavier with muscle, and had killed more men than Nathaniel had likely met. But Nathaniel kept his eyes level. "I have reason to believe the debt itself is fraudulent." A murmur ran through the assembled witnesses. Gorath's face darkened. "You accuse me of lying." "I accuse you of inflating the claim," Nathaniel said. "The death of a guardsman would typically require compensation of 500 silver marks, not 5,000. I believe you have manufactured the larger sum to make it impossible for the Norgath clan to pay in coin." "The amount was set by the magistrate," Gorath said, but there was an edge to his voice now. "Are you questioning his judgment?" "I am questioning whether he had all the facts," Nathaniel replied. He turned to Lord Vaster. "My lord, I request a formal inquiry into the debt before this marriage is allowed to proceed. If I can prove fraud, the agreement is void." Lord Vaster stroked his beard, clearly torn. He was not a cruel man, but he was old and he valued peace on his lands above all else. Gorath was dangerous. Challenging him invited trouble, but Nathaniel was his steward and had served him faithfully for 6 years. "What evidence do you have?" Lord Vaster asked finally. "I will need time to gather it," Nathaniel admitted. "But I have correspondence from other magistrates in neighboring provinces that suggests—" "This is absurd," Gorath cut in. He took a step toward Nathaniel, his hand now fully on his sword hilt. "The marriage is legal. I will not allow some lovesick fool to—" "Enough." Lord Vaster's voice cracked like a whip. "Gorath, you will not draw steel in my hall. Nathaniel, you are making a serious accusation. Do you understand the consequences if you are wrong?" Nathaniel swallowed. If he was wrong, or if he could not prove it, he would likely lose his position. Gorath might even demand compensation from him, but that was not what made his blood run cold. If he was wrong, Lyra would still have to marry this monster, and now Gorath would have even more reason to make her life a misery. "I understand," Nathaniel said quietly. "Then I will grant you 2 weeks," Lord Vaster said. "In that time, you will present your evidence to me and to a neutral magistrate. If you can prove fraud, the marriage is void and the debt will be reassessed. If you cannot—" He looked at Lyra with something like pity. "Then the marriage will proceed as agreed." Gorath's face twisted with rage, but he was trapped by the same legal structures he had used to claim Lyra. To refuse Lord Vaster's judgment would be to insult the man on his own lands, and even Gorath was not quite bold enough for that with only 20 men at his back. 2 weeks, he said, his voice dripping venom. "But know this, steward. If you fail, I will not forget this insult. And my wife will pay the price for your foolishness." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Nathaniel felt Lyra's eyes on him, but he did not turn to meet them. He could not bear to see whether she was grateful or furious. "The ceremony is postponed," Lord Vaster announced. "Lyra Norgath will remain a guest of this estate under guard until the matter is resolved. Gorath, you and your men may take lodging in the East Wing." It was a careful arrangement. Lyra would be protected but also confined. Gorath would be nearby watching, waiting for Nathaniel to fail. The hall began to empty. Gorath stalked out with his mercenaries following like a pack of wolves. Lord Vaster gestured for Nathaniel to approach, and when he did, the old lord spoke in a low voice. "I hope you know what you are doing, my boy," he said. "Gorath is not a man to cross lightly." "I know, my lord," Nathaniel said. "You truly have evidence, or was this—" Lord Vaster trailed off, glancing toward Lyra, who stood still at the altar watching them. A gesture of the heart. Nathaniel's throat felt tight. "I have suspicions. I will find the proof." Lord Vaster sighed. 2 weeks, Nathaniel. For both your sakes, I hope it is enough." He left, and Nathaniel was finally alone with Lyra in the great hall. She walked down from the altar slowly, her movements careful, as though she was not quite sure what had just happened. When she reached him, she stopped an arm's length away. "Why did you do that?" she asked. Her voice was rough, edged with emotion he could not quite name. "Because it is wrong," Nathaniel said simply. "The debt is fraudulent, I am certain of it." "You cannot be certain," Lyra said. "Or you would have said so before today." She was right, of course. He had suspected for weeks, but he had not been able to prove it. The truth was that his objection had not been about evidence. It had been about desperation. "I could not let you go through with it," he said quietly. "Not without trying everything." Lyra's eyes searched his face. She was not beautiful in the way human women were, but Nathaniel had stopped seeing her differences weeks ago. Now he saw only the intelligence in her dark eyes, the strength in the set of her jaw, the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. "You barely know me," she said. "I know you better than you think," Nathaniel replied. "We have spent nearly every day together this past month." "Because you were arranging my marriage to another man." Yes, he could not argue with that. "But in doing so, I came to know you, your love for your family, your courage, your humor, even in the darkest moments." He paused. "You do not deserve this fate, Lyra." She looked away, her hands clenching at her sides. "What I deserve is irrelevant. My clan owes a debt. I made a choice to settle it in the only way we could." "What if there is another way?" Nathaniel asked. "What if the debt is not what Gorath claims?" "Then you have 2 weeks to prove it," Lyra said. She met his eyes again, and he saw fear there now beneath the strength. "And if you cannot, you have made everything worse. Gorath will not forget this. He will take it out on me." "I will not fail," Nathaniel said with more confidence than he felt. "You cannot promise that." Lyra's voice broke slightly. "You should not have done this, Nathaniel. You should have let me go through with it. At least then it would have been over." "Would it?" Nathaniel asked. "Or would it have been the beginning of a lifetime of suffering?" Lyra flinched. They both knew the answer. "I need to go," she said abruptly. "Lord Vaster is having me watched." "Lyra, 2 weeks," she said. "Find your proof, steward." "Because I do not think my heart can bear this hope if it comes to nothing." She walked away before he could respond, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Nathaniel stood alone at the altar, the weight of what he had done settling onto his shoulders like a millstone. He had 2 weeks to save her. He had no idea how he was going to do it. The next morning, Nathaniel began his work in earnest. His office in the estate's administrative wing was small but organized, shelves lined with ledgers and correspondence from a decade of managing Lord Vaster's affairs. He had always been good with numbers, good with details. It was why he had risen from a clerk's assistant to steward by the age of 28. Now he needed those skills more than ever. He started with the original claim Gorath had filed with the local magistrate. The document was straightforward enough on its surface. Marcus Thorne, guardsman in Gorath's employ, had been killed in the borderlands. Witnesses placed Lyra Norgath at the scene. The blood debt was therefore owed by Clan Norgath to Gorath as Thorne's employer and protector. The amount of 5,000 silver marks, was where things became suspicious. Nathaniel pulled down books of legal precedent and compared them to the claim. In every similar case he could find, the compensation for a guardsman's death ranged from 300 to 700 marks, depending on circumstances. 5,000 was the amount typically reserved for the death of a knight or a lord's son, but the magistrate had approved it. That was the problem. Magistrate Caro was known to be honest, if not particularly energetic in his duties. He had reviewed the claim and set the amount. His seal was on the document. Nathaniel needed to understand why. He drafted letters to 3 neighboring provinces, requesting copies of any similar cases involving Gorath or his men. He also wrote to the regional lord, Baron Kellys, who had authority over Magistrate Caro. The letter to the Baron was carefully worded. Nathaniel did not accuse Caro of corruption outright, but he asked for clarification on the precedent used to set such an unusually high compensation. The letters would take days to reach their destinations, and the replies would take just as long. Nathaniel did not have that kind of time. On the 3rd day, he did something risky. He rode out to the borderlands where Marcus Thorn had supposedly been killed. The location was a half-day's journey from the estate, a stretch of rocky hills that marked the boundary between Lord Vaster's lands and the unclaimed wilderness beyond. Nathaniel brought 2 of Lord Vaster's guards with him, both men he trusted. If Gorath learned he was investigating, there might be trouble. They found the site easily enough. The local farmers knew the spot. A stone cairn marked where Thorn's body had been found. Nathaniel dismounted and examined the area carefully. The ground was hard and rocky, difficult to read for tracks, but something about the place felt wrong. "This is strange," one of the guards, a man named Hugh, said. He was crouched near the cairn. "Look at this." Nathaniel joined him. Hugh was pointing at scratches in the rock near the base of the cairn. They were faint but deliberate, marks made by a blade. "Someone was sharpening a weapon here," Hugh said. "Recently, I would say, within the last few months." "After Thorn's death," Nathaniel said slowly. "Why would someone do that here?" "Unless they wanted it to look like a fight happened," Hugh suggested. "Make the site more convincing." It was not proof, but it was something. Nathaniel made careful notes and sketches of the marks. Then he asked the guards to help him search the surrounding area. They found little else of note, but one detail stood out. There was no blood on the rocks. If Thorn had died here in a fight, there should have been blood. "Could have washed away in the rain," the other guard, Tomas, said. "Maybe," Nathaniel agreed, but he made a note of it anyway. They rode back to the estate as the sun was setting. Nathaniel's mind churned with possibilities. If Thorn had not died at the cairn, where had he died? Had he even been killed by Lyra Norgath at all? When they reached the estate, one of the household staff was waiting for him. "The Lady Norgath asked to see you, sir," the girl said. "She is in the garden." Nathaniel found Lyra sitting on a stone bench near the herb beds. She was not truly a prisoner, but 2 of Lord Vaster's guards stood at a discreet distance, watching. She looked up as Nathaniel approached, and he saw the weariness in her face. "You went to the borderlands today," she said. "It was not a question." "News travels fast," Nathaniel said. "Gorath has spies everywhere," Lyra replied. "He will know what you are doing." "Let him know," Nathaniel said. He sat down on the bench beside her, careful to leave a respectable distance between them. The guards were watching. "I am not doing anything illegal." "You are making him angry," Lyra said. "That is dangerous enough." "I have to try," Nathaniel said. "Lyra, I found something today." "Not proof yet, but a lead. The place where Thorn supposedly died does not look right. There are signs that someone may have staged the scene after the fact." Lyra's eyes widened. "Staged it? You think Gorath killed his own man?" "I do not know," Nathaniel admitted. but I think the death may not have happened the way Gorath claims. If I can prove that, the whole debt comes into question." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "Why are you doing this, Nathaniel? Truly, is it just because you think the law is being abused?" Nathaniel met her eyes. He could lie. He could tell her it was about justice, about duty, about upholding the integrity of his lord's estate. All of those things were true in their way, but they were not the whole truth. "Because I cannot bear the thought of you married to that man," he said quietly. "Because over these past weeks, I've come to care for you more than is probably wise. Because when I imagine you suffering, it feels like a knife in my chest." Lyra drew in a sharp breath. "Nathaniel, I know I have no right," he said quickly. "I know this is foolish. You are facing a terrible fate, and here I am making it about my feelings. But you asked for the truth, and that is it. I am doing this because he stopped himself before he said the word. It was too soon, too much. Because I care for you." Lyra looked down at her hands folded in her lap. Her fingers were trembling. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," Nathaniel said. "I do not expect anything from you, Lyra. I only want you to be free." "And if I am free?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What then?" Nathaniel's heart raced. "Then you choose your own path, whatever that may be." Lyra raised her head and looked at him. In the fading light, her green skin seemed to glow. Her tusks caught the last rays of the sun. She was beautiful, and Nathaniel ached with the wanting of her. "I've thought about you too," she said suddenly. "These past weeks, you have been kind to me when you did not have to be. You listened when I spoke. You saw me as a person, not just a problem to be solved." She paused. "I told myself it was foolish. You are human, I am orc. There is no future in such feelings." "Why not?" Nathaniel asked. "Because the world will not allow it," Lyra said. "Even if you save me from Gorath, even if the debt is void, what then? Your lord will not permit his steward to marry an orc. My clan would be scandalized. We would be outcasts, both of us." "I would rather be an outcast with you than comfortable without you," Nathaniel said. Lyra laughed, a short, pained sound. "You say that now, but you do not know what it is like to be truly cast out. I do. My people have been pushed to the margins for generations. We survive because we bend, because we accept the scraps humans give us. If I were to be with you, I would bring that weight down on your shoulders. I would ruin you." "Lyra, you should focus on proving the fraud," Lyra said, standing abruptly. "That is what matters, not this." She gestured between them as though their feelings were something that could be dismissed with a wave of her hand. "This matters to me," Nathaniel said, standing as well. "It should not," Lyra said, but there were tears in her eyes now. "Please, Nathaniel, do not make this harder than it already is." She walked away quickly back toward the manor house. The guards followed her. Nathaniel stood alone in the darkening garden, his heart heavy. He had told her the truth. Now he had to make it mean something by finding the proof he needed. The next several days were a blur of activity. Replies began to arrive from Nathaniel's letters. The response from Baron Kelly's was cautious but promising. The Baron agreed to send a neutral magistrate to review the case, but warned that, if Nathaniel's accusations proved baseless, there would be consequences for wasting the Baron's time. The letters from neighboring provinces were more illuminating. Two of them included records of cases involving Gorath's men. In one, a farmer had accused Gorath of seizing his land through a fabricated debt. The case had been dismissed due to lack of evidence, but the farmer had disappeared shortly after. In another, a merchant claimed that Gorath had inflated a contract dispute into a criminal matter, forcing the merchant to pay triple the original amount to avoid prosecution. Neither case proved fraud in Lyra's situation, but they established a pattern. Gorath was known for using legal manipulation to take what he wanted. Nathaniel needed more. He needed someone who could testify directly about Thorn's death or about the debt calculation. On the seventh day, a break came from an unexpected source. One of the servants in the manor, a young woman named Bess, approached Nathaniel in the hallway. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder as though afraid of being seen. "Mr. Morren, sir," she said quietly. "I heard something about that warlord Gorath." Nathaniel's pulse quickened. "What did you hear?" "I was serving wine in the east wing last night," Bess said. "Gorath and his men were drinking, talking loud. One of them, a big fellow with a broken nose, he said something about Thorn, said it was a shame about the accident." "Accident," Nathaniel repeated. "That is what he called it, sir," Bess said. Then another one laughed and said accidents happen when you cheat at dice. And Gorath, he told them both to shut up, said the walls have ears. Nathaniel's mind raced. "Did they say anything else?" "No, sir, but I thought you should know." Bess bit her lip. "Are you really trying to stop the marriage, sir?" "To the orc lady, I am," Nathaniel said. "Good," Bess said firmly. "She does not deserve to be given to a man like that. I have seen the way he looks at her, like she is a thing, not a person." "Thank you, Bess," Nathaniel said. "This is very helpful, but you must be careful. If Gorath learns you spoke to me—" "I will be careful, sir," Bess promised and hurried away. It was not enough to take to Baron Kelly's magistrate, but it was a thread. If Thorn had died in an accident, perhaps during a fight over gambling debts, then Lyra Norgath was innocent. Gorath had simply framed him to create the blood debt he could use to claim Lyra. But how to prove it? Nathaniel spent the evening pondering the question. Then, on impulse, he went to find Lyra. She was in the small sitting room that had been set aside for her use, reading by candlelight. The guards outside let Nathaniel in without question. They knew by now that he visited her frequently. Lyra looked up as he entered. "You have news," she said, reading his expression. "Possibly," Nathaniel said. He told her about what Bess had overheard. Lyra listened intently, her eyes growing brighter with each word. "An accident," she said when he finished. "So my brother had nothing to do with it." "It would seem not," Nathaniel said, "but I need to prove it. I need someone from Gorath's company to testify." "They will not," Lyra said flatly. "They are loyal to him out of fear, if not affection. They would not betray him." "Perhaps one might if the price were right," Nathaniel said. "Or if they could be convinced that Gorath is going to fall anyway." Lyra shook her head. "It is too risky. If you approach one of his men and they report back to him, he will know you are close to the truth. He might do something drastic." "What could he do?" Nathaniel asked. "We are on Lord Vaster's lands. He cannot simply take you by force." "Can he not?" Lyra asked quietly. "He has 20 armed men. Lord Vaster has perhaps 15 who could stand against them. If Gorath decided the risk was worth it, he could take me and be gone before the Baron's magistrate even arrives." Nathaniel felt a chill. She was right. Gorath was a warlord, not a courtier. If he felt cornered, he might resort to violence. "Then we have to be smarter," Nathaniel said. "We have to make him believe we have less than we do while we gather the final pieces." Lyra studied him for a long moment. "You are risking so much for this. For me." "You are worth the risk," Nathaniel said simply. Lyra stood and crossed the room to where he sat. She stopped just in front of him, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of the lavender soap the manor provided. Her dark eyes searched his face. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Not just of Gorath. I am afraid that you will succeed and then I will have to make a choice." "What choice?" Nathaniel asked, though he thought he knew. "Whether to follow my heart or my head," Lyra said. "My heart tells me that you are a good man, that what I feel for you is real. But my head tells me that we have no future, that loving you would bring you nothing but trouble." Let me worry about the trouble, Nathaniel said. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her skin was warm, her palm calloused from work. Lyra, I have never felt this way about anyone. If you do not feel the same, tell me now and I will accept it. But if you do, if there is even a chance that you could care for me the way I care for you, then let us fight for it. Together. Lyra's breath hitched. Nathaniel, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Lyra pulled her hand back quickly as one of the guards opened the door. Mr. Morren, Lord Vaster requires you in his study immediately. Nathaniel's stomach sank. What is it? Gorath has made a formal complaint, sir, about your conduct. Nathaniel and Lyra exchanged a glance. This was exactly what they had feared. Lord Vaster's study was a cluttered room filled with maps and hunting trophies. The old lord sat behind his desk, looking tired and troubled. Gorath stood by the window, his arms crossed, his face a mask of cold fury. Nathaniel, Lord Vaster said heavily. Gorath claims that you have been harassing his men, spreading lies about him and interfering with his legal rights. I have been investigating the debt, as you gave me leave to do, Nathaniel said carefully. Investigating is one thing, Gorath said, turning from the window. Bribing servants to spy on my private conversations is quite another. So he had found out about Bess. Nathaniel kept his expression neutral. I have bribed no one. You have been asking questions, turning people against me, Gorath said, poisoning the well, so to speak. I demand that you cease this harassment immediately, or I will withdraw from Lord Vaster's hospitality and claim my bride by right of arms. It was a direct threat. Lord Vaster paled. Gorath, that would be within my rights, Gorath finished. The 2 weeks are nearly half over, and this man has produced no evidence of fraud. I have been patient, my lord, but my patience is not infinite. You have been patient because you know that if I do find proof, you lose everything, Nathaniel said. Gorath's eyes flashed. You have nothing. You have theories and suspicions. You have no witnesses, no documents, nothing that would convince a magistrate. Then you have nothing to fear from the inquiry, Nathaniel shot back. Enough, Lord Vaster said, raising his hand. Gorath, you will have your answer when the Baron's magistrate arrives. That is in 5 days. Until then, Nathaniel will continue his investigation within proper bounds. Nathaniel, you will not approach Gorath's men directly, nor will you make accusations you cannot support. Do I make myself clear? Yes, my lord, Nathaniel said. Gorath looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded curtly. 5 days. But know this, steward. If the magistrate rules in my favor, I will take Lyra Norgath as my wife that very day, and I will remember every slight, every insult, every moment of this delay. He left the study, his boots heavy on the floor. When he was gone, Lord Vaster slumped in his chair. You are playing a dangerous game, Nathaniel, he said quietly. I know, my lord. Do you have proof? Lord Vaster asked. Real proof, not just suspicions. Not yet, Nathaniel admitted. But I am close. I know the debt is false. I just need to prove it. 5 days, Lord Vaster said. That is all I can give you. After that, my hands are tied. Nathaniel left the study with his mind racing. 5 days. It was not enough time. He needed something concrete, something undeniable. That night, he lay awake in his small room, staring at the ceiling. Every path he could think of led to dead ends. Gorath's men would not talk. The witnesses to Thorn's death were all in Gorath's pay. Magistrate Caro would not admit to corruption, even if it were true. He needed a miracle. The miracle came the next morning, though it did not feel like one at first. Nathaniel was in his office when there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find a man he did not recognize. The stranger was thin, poorly dressed, with the haunted look of someone who had not slept well in weeks. Are you Nathaniel Morren? The man asked. I am. I hear you are looking into Gorath the Red, the man said. I have information, but I need your protection. Nathaniel's heart leapt. Come in, quickly. The man entered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Nathaniel closed the door and offered him a seat. The man sat on the edge of the chair, his hands trembling. What is your name? Nathaniel asked. Finn, the man said. I used to work for Gorath. I was one of his scouts. Used to. I left his service a month ago, Finn said. I could not stomach what he was doing anymore, but I have been running ever since. He does not like deserters. What do you know about Marcus Thorne's death? Nathaniel asked, getting straight to the point. Finn's eyes widened. How did you just tell me? Finn swallowed hard. Thorne was not killed by any orc. He was killed by Gorath himself. They were gambling, and Thorne accused Gorath of cheating. Thorne was drunk, stupid. He pulled a knife. Gorath killed him in self-defense, more or less. But then Gorath realized he could use it. Use it how? Nathaniel asked, though he already knew. There was this orc girl, Finn said. Gorath had seen her at a market fair months before. He wanted her, so he came up with a plan. He had some of us take Thorne's body to the borderlands near where the Norgath clan lived. We staged it to look like a fight. Then Gorath claimed that the girl's brother had done it. He bribed Magistrate Caro to set the compensation high enough that the clan could never pay. There it was. The confession Nathaniel needed. Will you testify to this? Nathaniel asked. In front of the magistrate, Finn hesitated. If Gorath finds out I am here, he will kill me. Lord Vaster will protect you, Nathaniel said. And once your testimony exposes Gorath, he will be stripped of his authority. He will not be able to touch you. You do not know him, Finn said, shaking his head. He has allies. Even if he falls, his men will come for me. Then we will find you sanctuary, Nathaniel said desperately. A monastery, a distant province, somewhere he cannot reach. But please, Finn. An innocent woman's life hangs in the balance. Finn looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right, I will testify, but you have to keep me alive long enough to do it. I will, Nathaniel promised. He brought Finn to Lord Vaster immediately. The old lord listened to Finn's story with a grave expression, then ordered that Finn be placed under guard in a secure part of the manor. Gorath would not be told of his presence until the magistrate arrived. This changes everything, Lord Vaster said once Finn had been escorted out. If his testimony holds, Gorath will be ruined. It will hold, Nathaniel said. He has no reason to lie. Let us hope the magistrate sees it that way, Lord Vaster said. In the meantime, we must be careful. Gorath must not learn of this. But secrets have a way of slipping out. 2 days before the magistrate was due to arrive, Nathaniel went to check on Finn. The room where he had been housed was in the North Tower, guarded by 2 of Lord Vaster's most trusted men. When Nathaniel arrived, he found the door open and the guards unconscious on the floor. Finn was gone. Nathaniel's blood ran cold. He shouted for help, and within minutes the manor was in an uproar. The guards were revived and questioned, but they had seen nothing. Someone had struck them from behind. Gorath was questioned, but he claimed ignorance. His men all swore they had been in the East Wing all evening. Finn's body was found the next morning, floating in the river that ran through Lord Vaster's lands. His throat had been cut. Nathaniel stood on the riverbank, staring at the corpse, and felt despair settle over him like a shroud. His witness was dead. His proof was gone. The magistrate would arrive tomorrow, and Nathaniel had nothing. He walked back to the manor in a daze. Lyra found him in the garden, sitting on the same bench where they had talked days before. I heard, she said softly, sitting beside him. I am sorry, Nathaniel. I failed, he said. His voice sounded hollow to his own ears. I promised I would find the proof, and I did, but I could not protect it. You did your best, Lyra said. My best was not good enough. Nathaniel looked at her, and the pain in his chest was almost unbearable. Tomorrow the magistrate will rule. Without Finn's testimony I have nothing. You will have to marry him. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I do not regret this, Nathaniel, even though it failed. You gave me hope, even if only for a little while. That is more than I had before. Hope is not enough, Nathaniel said bitterly. It is something, Lyra said. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. And what you feel for me, what I feel for you, that is real. Even if we cannot be together, it was real. Nathaniel turned to her, and the words spilled out before he could stop them. I love you, Lyra. I know it is too soon, I know it is foolish, but I love you, and I cannot bear the thought of losing you. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, she whispered. I have tried not to. I have tried to protect myself, to protect you, but I cannot help it. I love you, Nathaniel Morren. He kissed her then, there in the garden with the guards watching from a distance and the world falling apart around them. Her lips were warm, her tusks smooth against his skin. She tasted like salt and sorrow and everything he had ever wanted. When they pulled apart, they were both crying. What are we going to do? Lyra asked. I do not know, Nathaniel admitted, but I am not giving up, not yet. He spent the rest of the day locked in his office, going through every document, every letter, every scrap of evidence he had gathered. There had to be something he had missed, some detail that could still turn the tide. It was late in the evening when he found it. In one of the letters from a neighboring province, buried in the middle of a long list of legal cases, there was a reference to Magistrate Caro. He had been reprimanded 5 years ago for accepting bribes in a land dispute. The reprimand was minor, and Caro had kept his position, but it was on record. It was not proof that Caro had been bribed in Lyra's case, but it established a pattern. Combined with the unusually high compensation and the suspicious circumstances of Thorne's death, it might be enough to raise reasonable doubt. Nathaniel drafted a new document, laying out every piece of circumstantial evidence he had. The inflated compensation, Caro's history of corruption, the staged scene at the Borderlands, the overheard conversation about an accident, the convenient death of a potential witness. None of it was conclusive on its own. But together, it painted a picture. The magistrate arrived the next morning. He was a stern, middle-aged man named Harlow, known for his strict adherence to the law. Lord Vaster assembled everyone in the great hall for the hearing. Gorath stood on one side with his men. Lyra stood on the other, flanked by guards. Nathaniel stood before the magistrate's bench, clutching his documents like a lifeline. Magistrate Harlow reviewed the original debt claim first, then listened to Gorath's argument. The warlord was confident, almost smug. He had the law on his side, and he knew it. Then Nathaniel presented his case. He spoke for nearly an hour, laying out every suspicion, every inconsistency, every piece of evidence he had gathered. He talked about the inflated compensation, about Caro's history, about the staged scene and the suspicious death of Finn. He did not have proof of murder, but he made it clear that the timing was convenient for Gorath. Magistrate Harlow listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When Nathaniel finished, Gorath laughed. "This is absurd," he said. "The steward has no proof. He has theories and coincidences. He has not produced a single witness or document that directly contradicts the original claim." "That is because your men killed the witness," Nathaniel said sharply. "You have no proof of that," Gorath shot back. "The man was a deserter and a criminal. He likely had many enemies." Magistrate Harlow raised his hand for silence. "I have heard both arguments," he said. "This is a complex matter, and the evidence is largely circumstantial. However, there are enough irregularities in the original claim to warrant further investigation. Nathaniel's heart leapt. Gorath's face darkened. "I am ordering a full review of the debt," Harlow continued. "Magistrate Caro will be summoned to explain the compensation amount. In the meantime, the marriage is suspended indefinitely. Lyra Norgath will remain under Lord Vaster's protection until the matter is resolved." "This is outrageous," Gorath said, stepping forward. "The debt is legal. I have a right, you have the right to a fair hearing which you are receiving," Harlow said coldly. "If the review finds that the debt is legitimate, it will be upheld. If it finds evidence of fraud, the debt will be voided and you will face charges. That is my ruling." Gorath looked like he wanted to argue further, but he was trapped. To defy the magistrate's ruling would be to defy the Baron himself, and even Gorath was not quite bold enough for that. "How long will this review take?" he asked through gritted teeth. "As long as necessary," Harlow said. "I suggest you remain patient, Gorath. The law will take its course." The hearing ended. Gorath stalked out of the hall with his men, radiating fury. Lyra looked at Nathaniel with wide, hopeful eyes. Lord Vaster clapped Nathaniel on the shoulder. "Well done, my boy," he said quietly. "You have bought her time." But time was not freedom, and Nathaniel knew it. The review could take weeks, even months. And if Caro refused to admit to corruption, the debt might still be upheld. That night, Nathaniel could not sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with possibilities. They had won a reprieve, but not a victory. A soft knock at his door startled him. He rose and opened it to find Lyra standing in the hallway, wrapped in a cloak. The guards who were supposed to be watching her were nowhere in sight. "I bribed them," she said, a faint smile on her lips. "I told them I needed to see you. They are romantics, apparently." Nathaniel pulled her inside quickly and closed the door. "You should not be here. If Gorath finds out, Gorath is furious and drunk," Lyra said. "I heard him shouting in the east wing. He is not paying attention to me tonight." She stepped closer to him, her dark eyes searching his face. "I needed to see you, to thank you." "You do not need to thank me," Nathaniel said. "I did what anyone would do." "No," Lyra said firmly. "You did what no one else would do. You risked everything for me. Your position, your safety, your future." "Why?" "Because I love you," Nathaniel said simply. "I told you that, I know," Lyra said, "but I needed to hear it again. I needed to know it was real." "It is real," Nathaniel said. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. "Lyra, no matter what happens, no matter how this ends, what I feel for you is real." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, feeling the solid warmth of her against him. They stumbled back toward the bed, and he knew they should stop, knew this was reckless, but he could not bring himself to let her go. They made love that night quietly, urgently, as though the world might end before morning. Afterward they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her green skin. "What happens now?" Lyra asked softly. "Now we wait for the review," Nathaniel said, "and we hope that the truth comes out. And if it does not—" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "Then we run. I will not let you marry him, Lyra, even if I have to take you away from here in the dead of night and spend the rest of my life as a fugitive." Lyra lifted her head to look at him. "You would do that? Give up everything?" "I already told you," Nathaniel said. "You are worth it." She smiled, and for the first time since this had all begun, it was a smile without shadows. "I think I am the luckiest orc woman in the world." "I think I am the luckiest man," Nathaniel countered. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for a few hours at least, the world could not touch them. The review moved forward slowly. Magistrate Caro was summoned and questioned. At first, He maintained that the compensation amount was justified based on Thorne's value to Gorath's company. But when Harlow pressed him on the precedents he had used, Caro began to falter. Nathaniel was not present for the questioning, but Lord Vaster gave him regular updates. On the third day of the review, Caro admitted that Gorath had suggested the amount, claiming it was necessary to account for the loss of a trained guardsman. Caro had not verified the claim independently. It was not an admission of bribery, but it was close. It showed that Caro had been negligent at best, complicit at worst. Harlow also sent investigators to the borderlands to examine the scene where Thorne had supposedly been killed. They found the same marks Nathaniel had noted, and they agreed that the site looked staged. On the fifth day, Harlow summoned everyone back to the Great Hall. After a thorough review of the evidence, he announced, I have determined that the blood debt claim filed by Gorath the Red is fraudulent. The compensation amount was grossly inflated without proper justification, and there is substantial evidence that the circumstances of Marcus Thorne's death were misrepresented. Nathaniel's heart soared. Lyra, standing beside him, let out a shaky breath. The debt is hereby voided, Harlow continued. Lyra Norgath and her clan owe Gorath nothing. Furthermore, Gorath is fined 1,000 silver marks for abuse of the legal system, and Magistrate Caro is stripped of his position for negligence. Gorath's face went white with rage. This is absurd. You have no proof. I have enough proof to satisfy the law, Harlow said coldly. Be grateful I am not charging you with murder, Gorath. I suspect you had a hand in the death of the witness Finn, but I cannot prove it. Consider this your warning. If I ever see you in my court again, I will not be so lenient. Gorath looked like he wanted to draw his sword and cut Harlow down where he stood, but he was surrounded by Lord Vaster's guards, and his own men were outnumbered. He had no choice but to accept the ruling. This is not over, he said, his voice low and venomous. He turned his gaze on Nathaniel. You have made an enemy today, steward. I will not forget. Good, Nathaniel said, meeting his eyes without flinching. Neither will I. Gorath left the hall, his men following. They were gone from the estate within the hour, taking their anger and their threats with them. Lyra stood in the great hall, looking dazed. Lord Vaster approached her with a kind smile. You are free, my dear, he said. The debt is void. You may go home to your clan or stay here as my guest or do whatever you wish. The choice is yours. Lyra looked at Nathaniel. He saw the question in her eyes. May I speak with you? She asked quietly. Alone, they went to the garden, to the bench that had become their place. The autumn sun was warm, the air smelled of earth and herbs, and for the first time in weeks Nathaniel felt like he could breathe. You did it, Lyra said, turning to face him. You saved me. We did it, Nathaniel corrected. You were brave enough to hope. That mattered. Lyra smiled. So what happens now? Nathaniel took her hands in his. That depends on what you want. What do you want? Lyra asked. I want you, Nathaniel said simply. I want to build a life with you if you will have me. I know it will not be easy. There will be people who disapprove, who call us fools or worse. But I do not care. I love you, Lyra. I want to marry you. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? You could have anyone, Nathaniel. A human woman, someone who would not bring you trouble. I do not want anyone else, Nathaniel said. I want you, only you. Lyra threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. Yes, she said, her voice muffled. Yes, I will marry you. Nathaniel held her tight, feeling a joy so profound it was almost painful. They had won. Against all odds, they had won. The wedding took place a month later, on the same estate where Lyra had nearly been married to Gorath. But this time, the hall was filled with joy instead of dread. Lord Vaster gave his blessing and even provided the feast. Lyra's clan came, wary at first, but they saw the way Nathaniel looked at their daughter and sister, and they accepted him. Lyra wore a dress of deep green that brought out the color of her skin. Nathaniel wore his best tunic, the one he saved for important occasions. They stood at the altar where she had once stood as a prisoner, but now she was there by choice. The priest spoke the vows, and this time, no one interrupted. "Do you, Nathaniel Morren, take this woman to be your wife?" "I do," Nathaniel said, his voice clear and strong. "And do you, Lyra Norgath, take this man to be your husband?" "I do," Lyra said, smiling through her tears. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." They kissed, and the hall erupted in cheers. It was a sound Nathaniel had never thought he would hear in this place, but it was real, and it was theirs. The feast afterward was loud and raucous. Lord Vaster gave a toast, praising Nathaniel's courage and Lyra's strength. Lyra's brother Darren, cleared of all charges and free to return home, thanked Nathaniel for believing in his innocence. Even the servants joined in the celebration, Bess among them, grinning from ear to ear. As the sun set and the candles were lit, Nathaniel and Lyra slipped away from the crowd. They walked through the garden, hand in hand, and sat on their bench one last time. "Are you happy?" Nathaniel asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," Lyra said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I thought my life was over when my clan told me I had to marry Gorath. But instead it was just beginning." "I fell in love with you the first time we spoke," Nathaniel admitted. "You were so fierce, so determined to protect your family. I knew then that I would do anything to keep you safe." "You kept your promise," Lyra said. "You saved me. Not just from Gorath, but from despair. You gave me hope. You gave me purpose," Nathaniel said. "Before you, I was just going through the motions. Now I have something worth fighting for." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out. The future stretched before them, uncertain and full of challenges, but they would face it together. "Where will we live?" Lyra asked eventually. "Here on the estate, if you like," Nathaniel said. "Lord Vaster has offered to let me continue as steward, and he said we could have one of the cottages on the grounds, or we could go to your clan's lands, help them rebuild their farm." "I would like to stay here," Lyra said thoughtfully. "At least for a while. This place holds difficult memories, but also good ones. I think I would like to replace the bad with more of the good." "Then we will stay," Nathaniel agreed. Over the next year they did exactly that. Nathaniel continued his work as steward, managing Lord Vaster's estate with the same diligence he always had. Lyra became a familiar presence on the grounds, helping with the harvest, tending the gardens, and slowly winning over those who had initially been skeptical of an orc living among them. Gorath never returned. Rumors reached them occasionally that he had moved his operations to a distant province, but he seemed to have learned his lesson about crossing the law too openly. Magistrate Caro disappeared entirely, his career in ruins. Lyra's clan visited often, bringing news from the borderlands. With the debt lifted, they were able to rebuild their farm and reclaim some of their old prosperity. Darren, in particular, became a frequent visitor, developing a friendship with Nathaniel that both men valued. 2 years after the wedding, Lyra gave birth to their first child, a daughter. She had her mother's green skin and her father's brown eyes, and tiny tusks that would grow as she did. They named her Lyra, and she was the joy of their lives. Lord Vaster doted on the child as though she were his own grandchild. The staff of the estate, who had once whispered about the strange marriage between the steward and the orc woman, now cooed over little Lyra and brought her gifts. On Lyra's first birthday, Nathaniel and Lyra stood in the garden, watching their daughter toddle among the flowers. Lyra had one hand on her swollen belly, pregnant with their second child. You ever think about that day? Lyra asked. When you interrupted the ceremony? Every day, Nathaniel said. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever done. I am glad you did it, Lyra said. Even though I was angry at first, even though I thought you had made everything worse. You were right to be angry, Nathaniel said. I had no proof, no plan. Just hope and desperation. Sometimes that is enough, Lyra said. She turned to him, her eyes soft. You changed my life that day, Nathaniel. You gave me a future I never imagined. You changed mine too, Nathaniel said. He pulled her close, careful of her belly, and kissed her forehead. I love you, Lyra, more with every passing day. I love you too, Lyra said. My strange, brave, wonderful husband. Lyra squealed with delight as she discovered a butterfly in the flowers. Nathaniel and Lyra laughed, and Nathaniel scooped his daughter up, spinning her in a circle. She giggled, her small hands clutching at his tunic. This was their life now. Not perfect, not without challenges, but theirs. Built on love and courage and the willingness to fight for what mattered. 3 years later, they had 2 more children, both boys. The first they named Thomas, with his mother's pointed ears and his father's curly hair. The second they named Gareth, who had his father's build but his mother's strength. The cottage Lord Vaster had given them grew crowded with the expanding family, so Nathaniel and Lyra began to build a proper house on a plot of land the Lord granted them. It was not large, but it was theirs, and they filled it with laughter and love. Lyra's clan prospered as well. With their debt gone, they were able to expand their farm and even hire workers from neighboring human settlements. The prejudice against orcs did not disappear overnight, but it softened as people saw that orcs and humans could work together, could even build families together. Nathaniel and Lyra became something of a symbol in the region. Other mixed couples began to emerge, emboldened by their example. It was not always easy for them, but Nathaniel and Lyra offered support and friendship whenever they could. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lord Vaster threw them a celebration. The entire estate turned out, along with Lyra's clan and friends from across the province. It was a joyous occasion, filled with music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. As the evening grew late, Nathaniel and Lyra slipped away to their favorite spot in the garden. The bench was still there, weathered but sturdy, and they sat together as they had so many times before. 10 years, Lyra said, shaking her head in wonder. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. I know what you mean, Nathaniel said. He looked at her in the moonlight, and he saw the same woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. Her face was a little older now, her body marked by 3 pregnancies, but to him she was as beautiful as ever. I would not change a single moment, not even the terrifying parts, Lyra asked with a smile. Especially not those, Nathaniel said. They brought us here. Lyra leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of celebration drifting from the manor. You remember what Gorath said? Lyra asked suddenly. When the magistrate ruled against him, he said it was not over, Nathaniel recalled. That he would not forget. I have been waiting all these years for him to come back, Lyra admitted, for some kind of revenge, but he never has. Maybe he learned his lesson, Nathaniel said. Or maybe he found other targets for his cruelty. Either way, he is the past. We are the future. I like the sound of that, Lyra said. She tilted her head up to kiss him. To the future. To the future, Nathaniel agreed. They had built something good together, something that would last. Their children would grow up in a world where love mattered more than species, where courage was rewarded, and where hope was not just a dream but a reality. It had not been easy. There had been hard days and harder nights, but they had faced every challenge together, and they had won. As they sat in the garden under the stars, surrounded by the evidence of their love and their work. Nathaniel Morren and Lyra Norgath knew they had found something rare and precious. They had found each other. And that made all the difference. Years continued to pass in quiet contentment. Lyra grew into a bright, curious girl who loved reading and helping her father with the estate ledgers. Thomas became an excellent rider, spending hours in the stables learning to care for the horses. Gareth, the youngest, showed an early talent for growing things, working alongside his mother in the expanded gardens. Nathaniel rose in Lord Vaster's esteem, eventually becoming not just steward but the Lord's most trusted advisor. When Lord Vaster's health began to fail, it was Nathaniel he turned to for counsel on matters of governance and justice. Lyra, for her part, became a bridge between the human and orc communities in the region. She helped negotiate trade agreements, settle disputes, and foster understanding. Her natural wisdom and diplomatic skill made her invaluable, and she was respected by both peoples. One spring morning, 15 years after their wedding, Nathaniel woke to find Lyra already up and dressed, standing by the window of their bedroom. She was looking out at the land they had made their own, a small smile on her face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, rising and wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was thinking about the day we met," Lyra said. "How frightened I was, how certain I was that my life was over." "And now?" Nathaniel asked. "Now I am the happiest woman alive," Lyra said simply. She turned in his arms to face him. "I have a husband I love, 3 beautiful children, a home, a community. I have more than I ever dreamed possible." "We built it together," Nathaniel reminded her. "Yes," Lyra agreed. "Together. That is the important part." Their children's voices drifted up from downstairs, arguing good-naturedly about something. Nathaniel smiled. "We should go referee before they destroy the kitchen." "In a moment," Lyra said. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I just want to say thank you for being brave enough to speak up that day, for loving me even when it was difficult, for giving me this life." "You do not need to thank me," Nathaniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Lyra. I would interrupt 1,000 ceremonies for you." "I hope you do not have to," Lyra said with a laugh. "Once was quite enough excitement for a lifetime." They went downstairs together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the day would bring. Because that was what they had always done, from the very beginning. They faced things together, and as long as they had each other, they could face anything at all. In the great hall where Lyra had once stood as a terrified prisoner, where Nathaniel had found the courage to speak his heart, there now hung a portrait. It showed a family, a human man, an orc woman, and 3 children who were both and neither. They were smiling, their faces full of joy and love. It was a reminder of what could be built when people chose courage over fear, love over prejudice, and hope over despair. And it was a promise that such things would endure, passed down from generation to generation, for as long as there were hearts brave enough to fight for them. Nathaniel and Lyra's story became legend in the region. Bards sang songs about the steward who interrupted a forced wedding and the orc woman who was brave enough to hope. Parents told their children the tale as a reminder that true love could overcome any obstacle. But for Nathaniel and Lyra themselves, it was simply their life. The life they had chosen, the life they had fought for, the life they cherished every single day. And when they were old, sitting on that same bench in the garden with their grandchildren playing at their feet, they would look at each other and remember. They would remember the fear and the hope, the darkness and the light, the despair and the joy. But most of all, they would remember the moment when everything changed. The moment when Nathaniel Morren stood up in that hall and said 2 simple words, "I object." Those words had set them both free. and they had been free ever since to love, to live, and to build a future worth having. Together, always together,